Ronnie Decker. I am a registered nurse, and this is Nursing Analysis. Today, we will discuss the blood flow through the heart. Here is a quick illustration and review of the pathway of blood through the heart. The deoxygenated blood enters the heart through the vena cava, entering the right atrium. Then it passes through the tricuspid valve, flowing into the right ventricle, and is then directed through the pulmonic valve into the pulmonic artery and out to the lungs, where it is oxygenated. The blood flows back from the lungs by way of the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. The blood then travels through the bicuspid or mitral valve into the left ventricle. From there, it is directed through the aortic valve and into the aorta and out to the body. Now that we've finished the quick review, we will go into more detail of how the blood flows through the heart. Deoxygenated blood enters the right side of the heart from the upper half of the body by way of the superior vena cava, and from the lower half of the body by way of the inferior vena cava. The blood enters the right atrium during the relaxation phase of the heart. It collects here until the Atrioventricular Valve of the right side of the heart opens. This valve is known as the Tricuspid Valve. As this valve extends open, 2/3 of the blood pours into the right ventricle, which decreases the pressure in the right atrium and increases the pressure in the right ventricle. The remaining 1/3 of the blood is forced into the ventricle by the contraction of the atrium. Then the tricuspid valve slams shut, related to the pressure shift and back pressure in the ventricle, which produces a sound that can be auscultated and is commonly known as the lub sound of the heartbeat. Once the ventricles are filled and the valve is closed, ventricular contraction begins. The right ventricular wall moves inward and the septum moves upward. The pressure accumulated by this process forces the pulmonic valve to extend, and the blood is forcefully directed through the valve toward the lungs. The closing of the pulmonic valve, due to back pressure in the pulmonary artery, produces the sound commonly known as the dub sound of the heartbeat. Once the blood makes its way into the lungs by way of the pulmonary arteries, there is a brief exchange of gases. Carbon dioxide from the blood to be expelled during exhalation, and oxygen which is infused into the blood during inhalation. The blood is then routed back to the left side of the heart by way of the pulmonary veins. The blood enters the left atrium during the relaxation phase. Again, it collects here until the atrioventricular valve of the left side of the heart opens. This valve, known as the bicuspid or mitral valve. Just like on the right side of the heart, 2/3 of the blood pour into the left ventricle, decreasing the pressure of the left atrium and increasing the pressure of the left ventricle. The left atrium contracts, forcing the remaining 1/3 of the blood through the bicuspid or mitral valve into the left ventricle. The back pressure in the ventricle forces the valve shut and produces the lub sound of the heartbeat. You may have noticed this is the same sound produced by the tricuspid valve on the right side of the heart. This is because the right and left atria contract at the same time and both valves close simultaneously, producing one lub sound. Now, after the bicuspid valve closes, ventricular contraction begins. The left ventricle wall moves inward and the septum moves upward. This causes the aortic valve to extend and blood is forced into the aorta. To prevent regurgitation of the blood, the aortic valve slams shut due to the back pressure in the aorta, which produces the dub sound of the heartbeat. Note that here again, the aortic and pulmonic valves produce the same sound. This is because the ventricles also contract at the same time. So remember that the sound of the atrioventricular valves closing produced the lub sound, and the sound of the ventricular valves closing produced the dub sound. These sounds can be heard with the use of a stethoscope and are used to confirm closure of the valves. The forceful contraction of the heart causes the heart to move. The apex of the heart will move up and turns slightly as the ventricles contract, and this is known as the cardiac twist. We know that the aorta receives oxygenated blood to be sent out to the body, but not all that blood will make it up the arch of the aorta. The blood that remains trickles back down, but this backwash of blood is prevented from re-entering the heart due to the closed valves. So what happens to the blood? It enters the coronary arteries that branch off the aorta and is used to perfuse the tissues of the heart itself. Now you know the flow of blood through the heart. But we cannot end this lesson without having some fun. So here we go. This is a lesson about the blood fluid, keeping it whole by adding oxygen to it. Through the caves, both high and low, we start the trace of blood's directed flow. The right atrium and then ventricle begins this sequential. If you cannot visualize, draw it with your pencil. The tricuspid will open. That's what we are hoping. Here begins the spill and the ventricles will fill. Moving in from the side, the wall prepares to slide. It adds a little squeeze as the blood is forced through the pulmonic valve with ease. Moving up high where the pleural cavity lies. Now the blood is new, so what should it do? Remember, there are 4 chambers and we have only mentioned 2. Back to the left side, the pulmonary vein as its guide. We can continue this ride. Left atrium, then ventricle, back to your pencil, to low from high, through the by or my. Don't ask why, silly, silly guy. Sorry, I try. Now back to this sequential in the left ventricle. Waiting for action, we hear atrioventricular retraction. Moving in from the side, upward we glide. The ventricles contract, adding the force that we lack, as the septum joins in and picks up the slack. But wait, I think there is something that we missed, the proper terminology, the cardiac twist. Through the aortic valve, the blood will now flow. Many a places it now must go. But please do not ask how I know. Just remember, Lub-Dub said so. Thank you for taking the time to learn with nursing analysis. Please like and subscribe to enable the future production of educational videos and content.